in Agripreneur, where there's some very exciting things happening on the youth front. But we have an aging population of farmers. So the challenge is real, and we focus in these events on the entire agricultural value chain and food system, with a particular emphasis, of course, on off-farm innovation, job creation, and access to finance. And we're fortunate in today's panel in terms of the quality and depth of their experience across the sector. And we're going to begin by kicking off with Ama Jiampo from Ghana, CEO and co-founder of Scale Up Africa, which designs and implements cutting-edge programmatic solutions for clients, such as MasterCard Foundation, Access Bank, and others. And her thought leadership has been widely praised and featured in the media, BBC, Entrepreneur.com, TED Africa, Afrobytes, and of course, Forbes. So over to you, Ama. We're looking forward very much to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Lord Boateng. I'm so honored to be here, and it feels like I've come full circle because I went to primary school in Brent, where you were in the 80s. And so it's great to see you here, and thank you so much for the invitation, Nick. Good morning to my fellow panelists as well, and thank you, Nick, for the invitation again. So I'll start off with a quick intro as to what Scale Up Africa has been up to in Ghana. I moved to Ghana about 10 years ago to just explore opportunities and have a bit of a roller coaster ride, which it has been. And my co-founder and I, Olivia, set up Scale Up Africa about a year ago, just around the pandemic, when the pandemic started, to really address some of the issues around impact and gender, entrepreneurship, innovation, and all those kinds of things. So we are a B2B entrepreneurship development agency. So we work with corporations, foundations, DFIs, and NGOs to really kind of crowd in solutions and partnerships to solve some of our problems where it comes to youth, women, and SMEs in particular. So agri is one of the areas that we're very passionate and active in, as well as technology and innovation. Lord Barton just gave you a bit of a flavor as to some of the thought leadership in terms of our thoughts on how we can solve some of our challenges. We feel that the challenges are beyond urgent, and so we need a radical different way of approaching some of these solutions. And our approach is really to, again, crowd in ecosystems, local expertise, international partnerships to really get to grips with forming the relationships that are required to strengthen our value chains and create more opportunities for our youth and our women. So I'm going to play a short video just to give some context, and we will take it from there. One moment, please. My video is just loading up.
Sorry, apologies.
I think we're having problems with the video. So why don't you just launch into the message, and the video, if it comes. I've lost you. Have you lost me? Ama, Have we lost? I think we.
Yeah.
I'm just far away. I'm afraid we've lost your video, but we can just about hear you.
The connect. Can you hear me?
We can hear
I think
you.
I've lost connection.
We can hear you. So just present. Don't worry about the video.
Great. Okay. Great. So I'll continue. Okay. Fantastic. No worries. Okay. So I'll just talk through some of our projects that we've done recently, including the partnership with Mastercard Foundation, which is really a direct response to the COVID pandemic. And, you know, the issues around poverty have become even more heightened with the pandemic, with people's daily bread literally being taken away from them. So we've been tasked with really seeking out more of the gender and the youth component to this program. It's a COVID resilience and recovery program. And Agri is a huge part of that conversation in terms of delivering projects for, you know, women in agribusiness cooperatives, associations, from rural to peri-urban areas, to really just tackle some of the issues around learning about the new economy and the opportunities that are the digital space and technology presents to women in particular, who are often far behind when it comes to access to technology and digital expertise and tools. So you will find we're also very much in partnership with companies that are active in the agri-tech space. So Isoko is one of our partners, and we've delivered some training for several hundreds of women in the micro enterprise space, specifically, to just really leverage the power of the mobile phone to access even credit to get their raw materials and inputs for their farming, to show them how to be a bit more climate smart in the way that they're farming, and to access things like weather information and market information to actually ensure that they get a fairer price for their produce. We also support African women in agribusiness, again, providing training, capacity building support, and all that kind of stuff, together with some of our partners to deliver some business training and capacity building support. We've also supported in the northern parts of Ghana, which is really suffering from the effects of climate change already. As we know, the Sahara is clean materials for products like the ones you see, you know, that are based on, you know, straw. So, you know, access to some of these raw materials for women who weave is even becoming a problem because of climate change, and also lack of credit. And so in intervening and giving them some of the technical support and capacity building training support, we've been able to allow them to, again, to leverage the mobile phone to access credit, which enables them to access their raw materials for their straw, which enables them to now go ahead and produce their baskets. And one thing we did do was connect them to markets in North America to get them quality and standards trained up, you know, for them to then get access to a whole new market, which they didn't have access to before. So that means more money in their pockets. So, you know, weaving is not often thought of as an agribusiness. It's very artisanal, but it's obviously the raw material is very much fixed in the agri space, and plugging them into the digital sphere is something that we're very proud of and continue to do. So Scale Up is also very much into the virtual event space, because as Nick said, you know, having convenings like this is very important. And it also allows us to reach a lot more people across the continent of Africa to, just learn more about what's going on, what's new, what's, you know, what the trends are, to expose them to some of the opportunities that the new economy presents. And we were actually one of the first companies in Ghana to reach our clientele, the SMEs, who were interested last year from the COVID recovery. Calls about people, you know, having literally 1 week of runway for their businesses to stay open. So it was a very critical time. So we quickly opted online to offer services, access to advisors, bankers, financiers, to really give that kind of one-to-one and sort of you know, attention for SMEs in distress last year. So moving on swiftly, I'm rushing through this because I really want to get to the crux of this presentation. I know we're kind of pressed for time. So you know, what is the big idea for African agriculture? Ghana itself has been at the forefront of agri-technology for many years now, with many brands that some of you will probably recognize and know: Isoko, Grow For Me, Complete Farmer, Tractor, Farmer Line. You know, we're used to seeing a lot of images like this one in the corner here, with a man, you know, with a cutlass and hoe, back-breaking work in the sun. And that really has moved on to sort of, you know, more, you know, women driving tractors and drones to spray and prepare land. And you have at the bottom there a lot of the individual entrepreneurs who are Ghanaian. I'm flying the flag for Ghana, but Ghanaian, who have actually trailblazed and thought about some of these very well-structured companies that have become international and, if not, pan-Africanist. So sorry, 1 second. So this is our, this is what we're thinking. This is really the crux of it, is we want to produce and present to you guys. We have access to land, we have access to we have access to tractors and mechanization service providers, we have access to chain solutions, asset financing, routes to markets and buyers, as well as the business development support that agriculture needs to reach those who are producing the food that we need. Of course, climate change and access to food security is a huge problem for Africa. We import far too much. If you go to the supermarket in Accra, shelves import. Last year with the lockdown, that became more apparent. But luckily Ghana was able to cope with the issue of food sufficient. So we need to make sure that we hedge any risks where it comes to importation and food security. So the idea is to really have, we have secured 10,000 acres of land with our partners in the ecosystem, benefiting 30,000 farmers, SMEs, associations and cooperatives in Ghana. The idea is to really establish 10 agri-technology hubs, farm hubs. So we're taking the hubs from the city where you normally see the Silicon Valley type hubs that we've seen dotted around the continent and Ghana as well. We're taking it to the farms where we would set up agri-technology farm hubs, where we would really throw in all of the ecosystem players who are active in this space, already active, experience delivering solutions across Ghana, across the continent, to really reach those who are on the farms, in the communities, to organize them, get them together, and really crowd in the expertise, crowd in the land that is dotted around. We talk about smallholder farmers all the time in Africa, and that's always been the narrative. So for us, it's really about thinking big and getting agri to go big, to leverage the technologies and the innovations and the solutions, which often don't make sense in the smallholders setting and the historic ways that we've been doing things. So it's a 3-year program that we're proposing. Is $13 million to implement. It's highly modular, so we could start with $3 million and scale it up to 10, 30 million, 20, 100, 300 million, you get the picture. It's something that we're really looking to establish. All the partners are actually in the mix, those who are providing the services. And our objective really is to address the root causes of low productivity and poverty in Africa with an ecosystem innovation-led approach. That's really what we are proposing. So the project will build local capacity and deploy real assets to achieve scale and impact in the agri sector. And of course, we're addressing the SDGs as well, looking at women in particular. So the gender element is there, the decent work, industrialization, innovation is obviously at the core of agri-tech. So it's something that we're looking to, again, scale up and get more people to experience and get to know and have more money in their pockets for their families and what's important in life. Of course, zero hunger is what agri is also about, and also partnerships for the goals, which entails the very model, just having the number of partners that we've been able to secure under one roof, and doing all this together. I think coming together is actually the missing piece of the puzzle. It's highly fragmented agriculture in Africa, as we know. And so I think this approach of bringing people together is the way to go. And like Nick said and Lord Boateng said at the beginning, it's really about building relationships. And having been here for almost a decade now, we have those relationships here on the ground. It's just really about crowding in some of the resources that are required from corporate CSR, the DFI, social investors, foundations, and family trusts, those kinds of partners that we need to kind of get this off the ground. So that's us. I mean, that's really it. So the agri-tech farm hubs concept is really a sustainable social business model to move African agriculture from the smallholder to the big agri concept. And that's where the benefits of scale will come in and kick in. And the benefits of this approach, I feel, in particular, builds on local expertise and ecosystem strengths. It de-risks agriculture for social investors with catalytic capital. It connects value chains and makes it a smoother ride from the seed to the plates, as it were. And it's an attractive social investment as well, because you already have the job creation factor and have people learning more, upgrading their skills and understanding how they can be more productive. So the multiplier effect and the impact of that is huge. And it helps us to also obviously reimagine Africa's agricultural narrative, which is, again, has been very much set in the small narrative. We really need to go big or go home, as they say, but it's got to be something that we're more ambitious about and work together towards. I've talked about the socioeconomic impact already. And of course, with COVID, resilience and recovery, as a continuous effort. We're still in the middle of this third wave, apparently it's just starting. It's early days. And of course, we know that, Ghana in particular is a middle income country. So it means that, traditional funding the landscape has changed immensely for us, but it doesn't mean that the impact is not as great here in Ghana economically as well as socially. So we have a lot to do to kind of get it right and get it together. And we feel that this is a concept that we can talk more about and explore probably in the next segment. But we're definitely calling on sponsors and social investors to have a chat with us and, help us together deliver on real impact. So our call to action is really to bring it together and let's bring it to life. And maybe we'll talk again on the other side in the round.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amma, for that. A real call to action, some powerful messages there and some powerful images, if I may say so, around the whole notion of agri-tech hubs. Very, very exciting.
Paul,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt there. I have a backup of Amma's video, and I was going to recommend me playing it from my screen, if that's okay.
That'd be good.
Bear with me 1 second.
And whilst you're getting that together, let me just encourage everyone to put up your questions, comments in the chat. Well, there's a strong hand up, not hand out message there. And Nick, you'll be sharing that video, no doubt, and you'll be sharing the slide presentation so participants can access that after today's event. If we can move on now to our, with thanks to Amma, to our next speaker, Shriram Bharataram, a leading serial and social entrepreneur. Shri is the founder and chief mentor at Kuza. Kuza One Network is really about supporting youth, women, micro entrepreneurs from the low and middle income countries by helping them to learn, connect, and grow at scale on their own terms and pace using digital technologies. He's an alumnus of MIT, winner of the Kaufman Award for Social Entrepreneurship, and we're looking forward enormously, Shri, to what you're going to share with us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nick and Celia Moore, for this unique opportunity to be in front of your members. So as Paul, you mentioned, so Kuza Biashara, that's the name of the company. Kuza in Swahili means grow. Biashara means business. So we as a social technology enterprise are creating unique opportunities for youth, women, and micro entrepreneurs to learn, connect, and grow on their own terms at their own convenience. Over the past 9+ years, we've been focusing on health, agriculture, and most importantly, youth and women entrepreneurship. And to date, we have impacted close to 6.2 million people and created over 153,000 new jobs. Now, what is so unique about this is the enterprising nature of the Africans that we are seeing. They don't know what they don't know. And the moment you throw some light and show a possibility, the next thing you know is they just go and try it out. And in the process, we are seeing a magical thing. The biggest aha moment we had 4 years ago was every micro entrepreneur that we are working with are adding one other person, either from within their community, from within their family, and that's how the new jobs are getting created. To just set the context on the challenge, the inadequate farmer income and increasing youth unemployment are the two sides of the coin that are really the continent is struggling with. An average, if I speak from East Africa context and to be specific about Kenya, an average Kenyan farmer is 60-year-old. and an average Kenyan is 18-year-old.
Mm.
Like Paul, you mentioned, there is a massive intergenerational crisis that's happening. The farmers don't want the next generation to continue doing farming.
Mm.
And this is where the current approaches that we see, like I mentioned, ABC, the government extension services are very limited. An average government extension worker to a farmer ratio in Kenya is about 1 to 5,000. The recommended is 1 to 400. The donors are mainly operating through grants, and those are inadequate, and they run on a calendar as a program, and that's not sustainable. And private sector initiatives are siloed, commodity specific, and not brand neutral. Now, this is where we put up our hand and then said, hey, as Kuza, we are revolutionizing the resilience of smallholder farmers. And here is where we leveraging the power of the youth as a digital extension workers. This is a digital field force that we are creating. And in the process, one, we are creating rural jobs. We are encouraging them to stay back home and not migrate to big cities. And youth are gaining and garnering respect within their own communities because they are doing something meaningful. And most importantly, an economic activity is being created. And how they are able to do is by offering a set of bundled services of good agriculture practices, and then linking to inputs, credit, and markets. And this is where we are able to make a massive difference in the lives of smallholder farmers. Typically, an African smallholder is earning about $2 to $4 per day. That is the segment in which they're operating. And for them to move out of this poverty trap, there has to be a different way. And this is where our approach is. We are finding it extremely encouraging and unique because we are bundling it by creating a comprehensive suite of services, not just agriculture. We are also bundling livestock because agriculture is seasonal in nature. And what would the youth do in the non-season, non-peak time? And that is where we are bundling this with livestock. And then by creating good agriculture practices, we have digitized over 42 agriculture value chains in video format in 10 languages. That is the power with which, that is the thing that the entrepreneurs move around with. And gender is the most important lens for us. About 40% of our base are women right now. And we are creating flexible operation structure, and digital is the core for all our operations. In a nutshell, if you look at an agripreneur is somebody from within the community. They are not agronomists. They are people who are from within the community, have trust in the community. And what we do is we encourage them to work with about 200 farmers each. That is the span of control there. And then they provide advisory services for free. And I'll speak about in a minute how they do it. And then that's how they establish the trust and respect. Trust is the currency on which we are operating. And that is the reason why we are not bringing somebody from a big city to go and serve them. And we are creating capacities within the rural level. And the way they sustain is by facilitating quality inputs, credit, and markets to the same set of farmers. And that is where they're earning commissions, and those are the commissions that with which they're able to sustain. Now, as Kuza, we've actually do this in two parts. One is how we go about identifying, incubating, and launching youth businesses. Like my previous speaker spoke about how they're looking at starting 10 innovation accelerators. We actually challenged ourselves and said, even that is a difficult proposition when we have to go to 4,000, 40,000 villages. Last year, we launched something called READY, Rural Entrepreneur Development Incubators without four walls. You might find it interesting because we pivoted it on digital, and we are making this available in the remote areas. And this is where we systematically enroll youth, we build their capacities, and each of them start engaging farmers, and that's how they're starting up businesses. And once they do, the one network is a digital marketplace from where they are able to now provide marketplace services to them. And this is where we are crowding in all the service providers. And the biggest challenge for a service provider is they find it extremely hard and expensive to reach all the way to the last mile or first mile, depending on how you see it. And that is the connect that these youth entrepreneurs are able to provide. And that's the secret sauce behind how we are able to scale and sustain. And the digital extension service delivery is offered by using micro learning. The attention span of people is going down. What used to be 15 minutes a few years ago has come down to 15 seconds and going down to 5 seconds that TikTok, right? So we created 3-minute bite-sized learning nuggets on every aspect of good agriculture practices within agriculture and livestock. About 10,000 plus videos in 10 languages that is made available to our youth extension workers. It's a massive investment we did as KUSA. The second, we have these portable digital kits, which are designed to work without internet. And I repeat, without internet. This is the kit with which these youth move around, go to the farm gate, and they are able to screen content using this battery-powered projectors. And that's how in the bush, we are able to create learning environments. And that's magical for farmers to see high definition content being served. And the youth is able to now do something called micro mentoring using machine learning and AI technologies, which are designed to work offline. You see a small Wi-Fi router there, that's a portable cloud, which creates an intranet, and up to 40 people can connect to that without the need for telecom connection or without the need for internet. And this is the one that has actually helped us to leapfrog and engage over 6 million plus people across the continent. Where we are today, yeah, still early days, about 500,000 farmers that we are engaging with about 3,000 plus agri-entrepreneurs across 3 countries, 4,000 plus villages. And most importantly, we are seeing a trend of this growing exponentially. Last year alone, we have grown this network 20x in Kenya. Now, the secret sauce behind all of this is the ecosystem model. Each of our entrepreneurs are powering about 200 farmers, and under the hood, we are crowding in all the service providers, getting their products and services bundled in, and through the entrepreneur, we are now able to engage and serve the farmers. Now, this as a wheel is a flywheel that is now started spinning in, where we are leveraging the strength of the public sector. We are leveraging the philanthropy sector for the resources that they are putting in, and using the private sector as a means to now scale up and do this, and all of this bundled on a platform. That's what we are calling as a PPP model, private public philanthropy platform. And that's how we are kind of scaling this. And in a nutshell, that's what we are doing. And we are on a path towards creating 1 million farmers in Kenya alone in the next 24 months. We're part of an initiative that we co-designed along with the World Bank called Disruptive Agriculture Technologies. And that is the same model now we are looking at replicating in other parts of Africa. Paul, thank you so much for the time, and I'm returning 2 minutes to you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And that's a wonderful picture to end on. You know, I see my own grandmother there, and the look on their face is absolutely incredible. But this model of public philanthropy, private sector platforms, certainly well worth reflecting upon. And I'm sure there'll be lots of comments and chats in the chat room. So thank you for that. We now turn to Adedana Ashabir, who is the Regional Director Africa of Village Capital. She oversees the growth, health, and expansion of Village Capital's work and teams across the whole of the continent. She brings a particularly valuable perspective with a educational and work background that embraces Africa, the US, and importantly, China, having been educated both at Yale and at Beijing Normal University, as well as having spent some time working as a communication strategist for the Sino-Africa Center of Excellence. So we're looking forward enormously, Adedana, to hearing your presentation. Over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. Admittedly, you're not going to hear so much about the Sino-Africa past, but I will get more into what I've learned leading Africa's or Village Capital's Africa work for the last nearly 4 years, and more broadly, what I've observed in the startup ecosystem in Nairobi, where I'm usually based. Okay, share my screen now. All right. Wonderful. Can everybody see?
We can.
What I've shared? Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Adidana Shebber, and as was just said, I'm the Regional Director for Africa and the Middle East at Village Capital. Village Capital is the largest organization in the world supporting impact-driven and seed stage startups. So much of my remarks are going to be focused on the work that we've done supporting startup entrepreneurs across the continent with regards to ag tech. I will briefly introduce our organization and our work globally and in Africa, and then shift to thoughts on how to support the next generation of ag entrepreneurs. Since 2009, our team has worked directly with more than 1,100 entrepreneurs in 28 countries that have gone on to raise more than $4 billion in follow-on capital. Our affiliate fund, VilCap Investments, has since invested in 110 startups. And we have operations in the United States, Latin America, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. Our motto is democratizing entrepreneurship, and that is truly our core mission. And we seek to identify, train, and support founders from underserved and under-resourced communities across all our regions. We are perhaps most known for our peer due diligence and our peer selection process, which empowers entrepreneurs and sector-specific cohorts to vet and select their own peers for investment. The 110 investments I alluded to earlier were all selected by entrepreneurs. Our portfolio, as a result, is 45% female founded compared to the industry average of 15%. And in the United States, where nearly 75% of all venture capital goes to 3 states, the portfolio is 80% founded outside of Boston, New York, and San Francisco. Empowering entrepreneurs to make investment decisions have led to a more diverse portfolio without sacrificing commercial objectives. Shifting now specifically to our work in Africa, since 2012, 3 of our 9 investment readiness programs on the continent have focused on agriculture, and roughly a third of the more than 100 ventures we've trained were building ag and ag tech solutions. Here you'll see some names of noted program alumni. We've worked with agricultural ventures or ag tech ventures in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, Uganda, and Zambia, and we've seen a few trends and gaps over the years. 3 of our affiliate funds agriculture investments were some of our earliest capital deployments in Africa. And we quickly learned that there wasn't enough capital to support these ventures after our initial checks. Investors who normally preach patient capital were still hesitant to make bets on agriculture at the time. And this hasn't changed too much nearly 10 years later. Last year, 41% of all venture capital went to fintech, a trend that will no doubt continue, encouraged by the billion-dollar valuations and high-profile exits of Flutterwave and Paystack, respectively. We've also observed multiple waves of generations of ag tech during this time. And here is the way that I've grouped them, but I'm eager to hear how you all would. The first generation of ag tech in the early part of the last decade was largely one-off apps that provided information about weather and/or market prices. Eventually, those apps coalesced to offer multiple services through one app and delivered multiple data points. And we then saw apps that brought market cohesion and eliminated inefficiencies between various stakeholders. And as the entrepreneurship ecosystem progressed, we saw more crowdfunding platforms that allowed everyday people, both in and out of Africa, to invest in farms, thus addressing the key issue of farmer financing. Around the same time, we saw more innovations around drone technology and how it could be leveraged. And I'd say we're currently in the 4th generation of ag tech in Africa, a generation of entrepreneurs that will refine and perfect what has been done to date. And I'm not exactly sure where the 4th generation of ag tech startups leads us, but I do look forward to finding out. And ideally, I would love to see more hardware solutions, but hardware entrepreneurs face their own pitfalls even outside of agriculture, namely the lack of access to appropriate maker spaces and investment. Entrepreneurs and investors have both learned a great deal in the past 10 years about what does and does not work. Asking farmers to download multiple apps that solve distinct challenges is a tall order. And there isn't still, even though there are many apps doing certain things, there still isn't one or a handful of solutions that has captured significant market share across subregions or the continent at large. I think also there's an outsized emphasis and expectation of app technology. In Africa, we're asking entrepreneurs to solve all of the continent's problems. And this is not just in ag tech, this is across most sectors. We're asking founders to create jobs, to make the most of the demographic dividend, to help farmers access markets, to help vendors sell to consumers, to train and upskill their staff, to build sustainable companies that can hopefully scale and exit and provide a return on investment. And the wish list is long and it continues. And quite frankly, there are a lot of these problems that ag tech entrepreneurs cannot fix alone. And those expectations are daunting for young people who are choosing between potentially salaried work and taking a chance on an at times lonely journey that requires tenacity, resilience, and faith. AgTech entrepreneurs cannot build roads, and they can't negotiate beneficial trade agreements. Their solutions can live or die based on the decisions that governments make or don't make. Which now brings me to what I would like to see more of to support the next generation of AgTech entrepreneurs. And this is very much through the lens of an entity that trains and invests startup entrepreneurs, so keep that in mind. And I'm sure there are other ideas, and I'm eager to hear them as we progress to the roundtables. Firstly, there are more than 600 entrepreneur support organizations currently operating in Africa, but very few are exclusively focused on agriculture, especially when compared to the scope of both the opportunity and the challenge. Blue Moon in Ethiopia is one example that comes to mind. AgTech entrepreneurs need specific expertise once they've reached a certain stage of development, and most current accelerators only offer sector-agnostic support. AgTech entrepreneurs can only grow with so much generalist advice. And our next entrepreneur support organization training program in Africa, which will be our fourth, is actually training 2 such organizations in Kenya and Ethiopia on how to deliver content for circular agriculture ventures with support from IKEA Foundation. And if you're interested in learning more about that, please send me a note, and I'm happy to share details with ways you can be involved. One way that entrepreneur support organizations could address this is to partner with or potentially be completely annexed by agricultural universities across Africa. Empowering students through training and access to professor expertise could help develop future solutions. Amma has mentioned this in terms of the tech hubs that she wants to establish outside of the capital. Shri has mentioned this with his Ready initiative, and both are definitely examples of things that I would support in terms of decentralizing the support available to AgTech entrepreneurs and not forcing entrepreneurs to return to capital cities in order to gain access to what founders can expect. Organizations like AIN, the Africa Agriculture Incubator Network, are working toward this. And if you haven't heard of them, I suggest you look them up, and I can share their link as well. In addition, more ag-specific Startup Act provisions would also help, and more Startup Acts in general. Tunisia was the first African country to enact a Startup Act in 2018, followed by Senegal in 2019. And a few countries were expected to follow suit before COVID hit. And these are great first steps to support tech entrepreneurs of all sectors as a whole, but the challenges that ag tech founders face are niche and merit their own support and attention. Some of these provisions could de-risk ag investments for early stage, seed stage, and angel investors, or encourage the public and private partnerships that are desperately needed to catalyze sustained success for these businesses. And with that, thank you for your time. There are 2 reports that we've recently published that may be of interest to you. Unlocking Pipeline is about the challenges that entrepreneur support organizations face more broadly. And the other is our report that maps the agriculture investment space in Africa. There's a third that also investigates the efficacy of our peer selection investment model. And I'll share the links in the Zoom chat once I'm done wrapping up, which is shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adina, for what was a rich and thought-provoking presentation. You mentioned in that presentation involving and leveraging universities, and that's a useful segue into our next speaker's presentation, that of Dr. Luc Mettelkamp. And Luc brings an important perspective because he has a distinguished academic career, both as a researcher and as a teacher at Rhodes University and at Stellenbosch. But importantly, he is a farmer. He's actually farming now, so he's taken time off from the farm to be with us today. So you're very welcome, Luc, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And this has really been an incredibly inspiring session of presentations. Both Adidana and Siram, incredible food for thought, and what an amazing platform. So yeah, I'm Luc Mettelkamp, and I've been working in South Africa for the last 15 years, and the kind of intersects between agriculture and education. And yes, as recently I've also started venturing out onto what Adidana refers to as a somewhat lonely path into developing my own agricultural enterprise here in South Africa. So I think, for me, there's stuff we've spoken about a lot already. There's this huge demographic bubble in across the continent, which I think we all know about, but I just wanted to draw attention back to it because I think this is going to profoundly impact the kinds of agriculture, the kinds of food system that we're going to see going forward. And I think it also has a massive implication for the types of the ways that we're going to be able to train and the kind of conceptualizations of training that we previously had. And I think for me really reiterates this idea that we can't replicate these traditional models of the way that top-down education will take place simply because there's such a massive capacity gap between the number of people to train, the institutions that are there to hold that, and the number of people we're going to need to be building agricultural capacity within. So there's this huge gap. 10% of young people are likely to enter any kind of vocational education and training in Africa. The big question then is what happens to the other 90%? And I think that's the kind of driving question from an education perspective, an agricultural perspective, we really have to hold. You know, and seeing the amazing work of people like Sriram, extremely inspiring. Drawing from research that we've done here in South Africa over the last 5 years, I think also just appreciating the fact that young people they're motivated by a range of different factors. And for a lot of young people, the desire to make an income and a good living is right up there. But that said, I think we should not lose sight on that for many, many young people today, irrespective of their demographic or their economic position in society, there's also a strong sense of wanting to be part of something bigger and a strong sense of social purpose. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. And I think that as we're thinking about education, as we're thinking about innovation, we need to be encouraging that sense of civic and ecological motivation in young people, because that's what's going to drive Africa through to the SDGs and the kind of broader transformations around kind of just transitions that I think we all recognize need to happen. The benefit of this massive demographic bubble, obviously, a lot of openness to new ideas and a hunger to join the digital economy. You guys are all well aware of that. From a food system perspective, we know food value chains are the biggest kind of job creator, livelihood space in the continent, not just agriculture, but along the whole value chains of distribution and kind of small scale retail, informal and highly fragmented. And I would say that's something to be celebrated. The fragmented and informal nature, I think we shouldn't be driving to try and formalize. We should be trying to support and enable the informal economy to generate more meaningful and dignified livelihoods. This informal economy is the safety net, often for the most vulnerable. And I have a big question around when we drive agriculture to go big, what happens to all of those for whom the food economy is a safety net of last resort? So I think this model that Sriram was talking about of a +1 approach is extremely exciting. We also need to recognize that the food space across Africa is the last big market frontier for big agriculture globally. And there's going to be a lot of investment and money crowding into that, which doesn't always have Africa's best interest at heart. And I think we need to look power head on and acknowledge that there are issues of inequality in decision-making in the way that food sector development will take place and is taking place, and being really real about that. The space is also rapidly digitizing, which I think has the potential to either create a massive barrier in terms of a digital divide that can open up, but it's also potentially a space for radically democratizing learning, access to markets, access to information, access to finance, and access to inputs, which is, if we get it right, a very exciting proposition. So looking to the future, I think for me, and this is possibly a bit of a contentious statement, but it's asking the question for all of us of what it means to invest in ag tech and be involved in agriculture in a world that already produces too much food. I think there's been a big narrative that's been driven by, I suppose, a complex arrangement of actors around this need to kind of feed the world. And while I really don't deny that hunger is an extremely important issue we need to be looking at, I think this feed the world narrative, which is based on this notion of producing more food, is misleading because we, at a global level, are overproducing food already. And I think for me, the questions are really much more about who is producing food and how that food is getting produced, and who owns what share of the profits of that system, and who makes decisions at the end of the day. And I think that links back to some of Adedana's comments around not ignoring the policy space, not ignoring the international trade space either. So I think we really need to kind of keep that front and center in our kind of bigger picture thinking around this. Secondly, looking to the future, I think, and Adedana, you were talking about these phases of agtech innovation. And I think for me, what I'm really excited about, and we're getting a little bit involved with from the South African perspective, is looking at platform-based models that bring in skills and place skills development at the center of kind of agricultural development and entrepreneurship, and then build up the access to finance, inputs, and support on top of a strong skills base. And I believe that given the number of youth and the scale of the agricultural sector relative to the number of kind of qualified specialists in this space, we really need to be quite innovative about how we bring in experts and advice to that space. And I think also really enabling and brokering peer-to-peer learning for agricultural best practice among farmers. So how do we enable, in light of the skills deficit, how do we enable excellent farmers to become the trainers for other farmers? And I think there's a space there that's extremely exciting. And then I think also, looking back at a range of our work in South Africa, with technology, I think there's often this idea of scale, but I also think that there's a need to recognize that very often with technology in low-tech environments, many technologies succeed because of social processes that surround them, and that every new tech user almost needs to be onboarded by another warm body, someone they know, someone they trust. So it's thinking about the social scaffolding that surrounds these new tech innovations, and thinking of rather about tiny education than mass education. Some barriers, as I see them. I think there's still a kind of prevailing societal view of agriculture as a low-tech space. And if I reflect on my own journey over the last 3.5 years of setting up a farm, I think we are grossly underestimating the skills and the competencies and the breadth of expertise that is required to succeed in the agricultural space. You need to be someone who is ready and willing to be very slow, patient, pay attention to what's happening on the land, make strategic long-term decisions. You've got to be an active and aggressive marketer. You've got to be able to make quite complex financial risk and planning decisions based on a range of unknown weather and environmental factors, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's this notion of agriculture as low skill, and I think we're grossly underestimating, when we talk about agricultural transitions, the breadth of the educational challenge that faces us. We need to be very cautious of top-down solutions, and I think investing a lot in building grassroots, bottom-up movements for agricultural transformation, and putting the decision-making power in the hands of people that we're serving. I think the supermarketization of African value chains is a huge risk, and particularly attached to that, the kind of district or the central distribution center model that implies. So big supermarkets sourcing from a central distribution center, which is fundamentally mismatched with the ways that smallholder producers are able to produce. So I think we need to be really rethinking the structure of markets, being very careful of supermarkets. And I think what's coming to this kind of point of weak states and weak state capacity is a big challenge. To wrap up, really, I think we need to celebrate and encourage this kind of dual motivation of young people, not just talking about entrepreneurship, but talking about social entrepreneurship, and bringing in an ecological lens into that too. I think we need to be really thinking about how we drive food system leapfrogging and not kind of falling into the trap of replicating global big ag models onto African value chains. They haven't worked elsewhere, and I really think we have an opportunity in Africa to learn from some of the mistakes that North America and Europe have made, and leap a big way forward. I think there's a big and very exciting movement around free data and free access to data. I think we need to push funding and support into that, because data access is a big barrier for low income, the $1 to $2 environment. So low data, free data, extremely exciting, a lot of stuff happening there. And then I think not always looking to try and start something new, but saying, what are people already using? And from our perspective, WhatsApp has been an incredibly powerful vehicle for supporting agricultural learning, developing learning networks. And I think we need to be really creative about how we use these low-tech platforms to drive education and innovation. And then I think linking in, we need to be thinking about ecosystems. We need to be pooling in kind of universities, agricultural colleges, not as the centers of learning, but as actors within much wider networks of learning and support. So from my side, yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much indeed for that presentation, Luke. Some challenging interventions and some challenging topics which require us to think very deeply, not least your presentation of Africa as the last food market frontier. That has real implications for us, and also the role of the state in all of this. For me, one of the most shocking statistics I came across when I was British High Commissioner to South Africa was that the agricultural productivity of the black farmer was higher in the Ciskei and in Bophuthatswana under the old apartheid regime than it was in the new South Africa. Yeah. And that is a tragic statistic, yeah. And indicates the scale of the challenge that we face in terms of a model supporting the small and medium-sized farmers. So thank you for that. We now turn to a man who has been grappling with these issues across some 16 African countries. He's based in the Cameroon. His name is Paul MBUA, an entrepreneur, fund manager, and angel investor with more than 13 years experience, the founder of ZikTech Hub and ZikTech Corporation, all working under the umbrella of the social enterprise ZikTech organization. ZikTech Hub, co-working, creating, accelerating space in the Cameroon, and ZikTech Corporation, linking investors to entrepreneurs and building companies throughout Africa. Paul, we're looking forward enormously to your contribution to this panel. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. It's been an inspiring 1 hour. Heard a lot from so many people, and thanks so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts. So basically, I'll share some thought-provoking, my line of thoughts and how we think about agri-tech within ZikTech Hub. So you've given a brief introduction of myself, and we started out with the idea on how we can use technology to amplify what we're doing. Because one of the presenters talked about there's a lot of production happening already in Africa, but how do we channel that, and how do they see the benefits from the level of the farmers right up to the level of the households? Because those are the key elements or key players in the value chain, because we think about the big supermarkets, we think about the government, but how do we empower both the household and the small farmers? That is where we see real progress. So our thinking is working with decentralized, specialized centers. What we see within our community and the work that we do, most of these centers are being located in the urban areas. So how do we take it down to the rural areas? How do we take development down? And when I talk about specialized centers, I'm talking about where people can acquire farming skills and techniques, not just one-off, because based on our experience, you just have organizations coming in to do one-off trainings, but how do we have, both self-paced and also ready available training for those farmers, especially the cooperatives, and not just looking at it as, helping them, and how do we teach them how to form businesses out of it? Some of them already have lands, some of them exist in cooperatives, but how do they better run these structures? And also technology is very key, and that's how we come in. And we've seen the exponential growth in how non-tech agripreneurs, when tech is being included in the mix, we get to see exponential growth in terms of output, in terms of resources, financial gains. So this is very critical. And from what we've seen also within the community, we've seen both of a top-down approach in terms of curriculum development. But I believe we need to look at a bottom-top approach. What do I mean by bottom-top approach? We have already best practices within the communities. These people need to be actively involved in developing the curriculum. We have great work being done by GIZ, USAID, and the rest. But what we see within the work that we do is when they come with their own, and these community members don't see themselves in these various techniques or these various materials that's been brought to them. So what we believe is active adaptation of the curriculum to fit the environment and to fit the various stakeholders. And in Africa, we know this already. And this is very, very true. We need to look each other in the eye and tell ourselves the truth. We know one of the things that limits agric growth in Africa, especially in Cameroon, is the middleman monopoly, where you see farmers that produce a lot, but they don't feel the effects of what they produce. They don't see the benefits. So you see people start running to the cities because they believe they need to look for something better. So while we're thinking about, how do we develop systems? And I believe that's where the agri-tech sector comes into place, where we've seen, for example, we have a startup within our ecosystem, within our hub called Jumba, and simply what they do is to eliminate the middleman. They are the middleman, but they are not the middleman. So they help, simply what they do is they help to connect both the farmers and the household. And you see amazing things happening in terms of availability of raw produce, in terms of, the farmers having the right information, in terms of, the farmers knowing that at the end of their production sales or their production cycle, they have somebody at the end of the value chain that would do the job for them. Also, 3 keywords I want us to think about, which is production, processing, and preservation. Without these 3 things, all what we're doing here won't succeed. It's very important for us to know that for the next generation of African entrepreneurs or agri-tech entrepreneurs, we need to focus on local production and local manufacturing. 80%, 90% of the production is from China, and that is foreign exchange going. But we have local technical expertise, which can develop this equipment. And I think it needs to be in a more coordinated fashion. We have little pockets here and there where we have projects that we're working on with local farmers on how, for example, we have farmers that work with local polytechnics and they develop machineries for them to convert their palm kernel to oil, but that is at the local level. How can we get to the level where they can preserve it, they can bottle it, and they can have other derivatives? So helping them also to get the linkage between manufacturing, processing, and also preserving those goods, because we know 60% of loss is at the level of preservation, which is very important in what we do. And a beautiful lady from Village Capital already said it. This is very important in activating agri-tech development, especially in Africa. Using the hubs as a collaborative framework as a point of, local implementation partnership, because we implement lots of projects in terms of agri-tech within our community, not just here in Lome, and we're seeing the effects of it. Through that, we're getting more young people interested in agri-tech. We have young people interested in technology, developing exciting products, but how can they get into the dance and also see how to empower that sector? Sharing of knowledge is very important. So when I talk about the hub, is also a comprehensive way to say any support organization which is involved in supporting entrepreneurs. They have to be actively involved in that. And where we've seen, especially in our hubs, is exchange of best practice, where we bring these cooperatives to interact, especially the non-tech-driven agripreneurs, to interact with our tech entrepreneurs. How can they collaborate together? What are their issues? So we bring them together, and this provides a platform for them. And I think through the AfriLabs network, where we have over 200 and something tech hubs, we can amplify the solution together. So these are my thoughts, my final thoughts. I believe development organizations will play and are still playing a very great role in boosting agri-tech in the country. I'll take my country, Cameroon. We have within the development programs, lots of camps for the internally displaced persons. But we want to see lots of purchases being done from the level of these agripreneurs. Then we'll see, lots of funding that goes into support them in terms of pre-production and also post-production. So I believe a lot can be done. Why not we feeding ourselves? So, for example, we have within the Northwest and the Southwest, we have over 900 internally displaced persons. Why not engage the agripreneurs within this region to feed their brothers and sisters, thus providing employment and a whole lot of things. We've talked about the linkage between academia, research lab, and skilled hands, which is very important for us to, complete the dot in terms of, bridging the gap of knowledge and also, testing. We've talked about preservation and the rest. And reform is very important. We need to look at access to land. These are the things we face with our agripreneurs. Within Cameroon, if you're less than 40 years, you can't have a land that has your title. You can't have a land title, which gives you ownership of that land, those are the things I think in terms of policy reform, it has to actively and work on that. We have our countries already working on a Startup Act, but I believe having agri-tech policies specialized to tackle this particular sector is also very important. In a meeting we had with the government, we challenged them. You have lots of cabinet meetings, government meetings, where they drink water, where they drink juice, and we see lots of foreign juice on our tables. Why not engage with the local entrepreneurs that we have, buy their products? This is what you do. You speak, involving these young entrepreneurs and promoting them. We had the situation where 2002, 80 to 90% of all imports of chicken was out of the country. But when the government had to put a ban and facilities in terms of import substitution, we saw a great rise, in terms of those involved in chicken cultivation. And lots of these entrepreneurs that we support in terms of business development services, they are involved in chicken rearing. And we've seen a great rise in terms of income levels because of that. So those are the things we believe, through the various key stakeholders we can do. And when it's well coordinated, we'll see a rise in terms of young people involved in agri-tech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you for throwing down the challenge as you have to policy makers. And I think the example you gave of what actually is on the table of policymakers literally is a very good one. And it's a question for all of us to answer. And I can tell you one story from where I am now. I'm actually in our Parliament building, and a conscious decision had to be made and was made several years ago now that all the water on the tables where it was bottled water should be bottled water from local indigenous water sources within the British Isles. That was a conscious decision that had to be made in terms of procurement. So you're right to challenge legislators in this very practical way. You're right also to give the example of where even amidst conflict, it is possible to find opportunities for agri-entrepreneurs. And I think your example of feeding internally displaced persons and involving those persons and the surrounding businesses in producing food for them is a lesson that the World Food Programme and us all can learn from. So thank you for that. Everyone's been very disciplined, and as a result of that, we have some time now for questions and participation on the part of those who have been with us throughout this fascinating conversation today. And the first is one that has come up in the chat, and it's going to be directed first of all to you, Adedana, but then I'm going to take it to everybody in terms of where there are gaps, where there are deficits that need to be addressed, and how might we best address them. You, Michael Ofuri Akufa, reminds us, Adana, mentioned a deficiency in hardware provision. Could you mention what other gaps you've identified at Village Capital?
Yes, so one of the ones that I spoke to was a gap in financing. We see that almost half of venture capital, at least last year, went to fintech ventures. Some of that does have overlap with ag, but by and large, it does not. Payments is perhaps the biggest share of that. And so ag is, there's patient capital, but there's also long returns. And so some investors are patient, but they're not that patient. And so there's a difference in patience between 1 to 3 years or 1 to 5 years, and then 5 to 7 or 5 to 8. And so I think that is one of the bigger challenges in terms of the venture capital space. But we also know what you alluded to in terms of what financing is actually available outside in terms of traditional banks and what have you. That's also lacking. And then the other gap that I was speaking to was and this is a critical look at my own industry and sector, which is the business boom of incubators and accelerators. There are nearly 700 of us, and many have been in existence for quite a few years now, for around 10 or so, the older ones. And I don't think there are as many success stories as there are organizations that support. And there aren't as many success stories as the amount of time and funding and money that has gone into the sector of startup support. And so we have to take a critical look at why is that? I think obviously for the first few years with nascent ecosystems, you learn. And I think we're now at an inflection point and at a certain level of maturity where it's important to internally discuss among our sector, what could we be doing differently? And so I think going to where entrepreneurs are. So for example, what Amma and Shri mentioned in terms of Ready and the plan to have the 10 tech hubs outside of Accra, I think that's a great first step and a great step in general. But there's a bit of internal soul searching, I think, that we have to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Amma, over to you. Deficits, gaps, things that need to be done where there's inadequate provision at the moment, or inadequate capacity at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely think, there
Amma?
is strength in numbers. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yep.
I think there's certainly, a case to be made for strengthening our ecosystem. As Adidana just said, there are so many hubs that are obsessed with this Silicon Valley, perception of helping the ecosystem. And I think that's probably railroaded the conversation and the impact that some of these interventions have made. So I think we really re-examining the way that we support micro and small enterprises at the rural level, at the micro, the peri-urban level. That's where, the outskirts of the big cities, that's where I think the biggest opportunities are. Linkages between the rural areas, the peri-urban areas, and into the main cities. I think these are also opportunities that we need to look at, in terms of as an ecosystem effort. There's certainly a lot of opportunity for us to connect more as ecosystem service providers. So as intermediaries, as experts, as those of us in the middle that are kind of linking investors to opportunities. There's a lot more we can do for local development and economic initiatives. I think that's the biggest opportunity that I see in the space.
Thank you very much. Shri, your take on this question.
Thanks, Paul. My sense is what got us here will not get us there. We cannot just take a top-down approach and start lifting and shifting models from Silicon Valley or elsewhere in the world and then hope it will work here. No. We got to have our own indigenous technologies and solutions. Yes, the methodologies that worked elsewhere, we can always embrace them, but there is an element of localization and customization that is needed. Especially in a space like agriculture, for every 200 kilometers, everything changes. The land, ecological, so everything changes. We cannot have one solution fitting for all. Having said that, and I really liked what Luke mentioned about Luke, fantastic insights. Definitely would love to pick your brains on how one can collaborate with this kind of mechanism. So there is a need for us to engage the academia, research, private sector, public sector, and most importantly, philanthropy sector. A lot of philanthropy dollars are going in the name of projects. Projects start and end on a calendar. What happens after that? The excitement with which a project is started, you don't see the same excitement when the project ends. What is an exit option for many of these philanthropy-led projects? Can we not have a narrative of our own and crowd in all the different philanthropies to align towards one common mission and bring them together? And that's an attempt I'm doing in this lifetime. I've been at it for a while now and seeing the ray of hope and light right now, end of the tunnel. And that is where the public-private philanthropy unifying into a platform approach is probably where I'm putting my bet on that and trying to see how we can align some of the big cats to start seeing the same picture. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Luke, this aligning the public, the private, the philanthropic on a single platform, overcoming the project mentality, dealing and creating effective policy interventions. What's your take on all of this?
That's a huge question, and it's I suppose something which has plagued donor funding and philanthropy since its inception almost. I was quite interested to have a look a little bit more at what Adidana was talking about in terms of their democratizing decision-making around where grants and funding goes. And I think, the potential to link that in with platform-based models that I really think it's not just about aligning capital. I think we also need to align and bring in to bear within a single space the knowledge that we don't know, the acknowledgement we don't yet know how to do what we're trying to do. We don't yet know how to. We've got no precedent for for capacitating people into a just food system in the current context. We've never done it before, so I think there's a lot of small pockets of solution that we need to kind of also bring into that, and that's also what I hope that we can start doing with one of the good roles technology can play is starting to make that more accessible and visible to people. How that links into the policy space, yeah, I think that's difficult. I mean, and linking back into your example around South Africa, there's conceptions around how policy unfolds that just don't hold true in a lot of the spaces we're working. It's like these understandings of what it means to write a policy, and that the assumption that the policy then gets applied in the way that it's intended is just not a reality in many of these spaces. So I think it's it's such a multifaceted thing. I mean, it's political accountability. It's also equipping people to be, I suppose, policy tricksters in a way. Big questions. I don't have the answers.
Well, we're going to try and find out the answers, and we're going to do some digging as we move into the next stage of today's event. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Nick to introduce us all to the technology and the mechanisms of these roundtable discussions. But before I do, I've got one question, and I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to come to you first, Paul, and then others can respond if they feel moved to do so. You showed two pictures in your presentation, Paul, that elicited two different responses in me. One was the picture of the tomatoes. Now, if I had a hot meal for every picture I've seen of African tomatoes by the roadside, beautiful pictures, lovely tomatoes. If I had a hot meal or $1, I would be bigger than I am, richer than I am. This is a very popular picture. So I saw that picture, and my heart sunk a bit, because I know and have seen with my own eyes all over the continent in my life, which has been a mercifully long one. So many people bring their tomatoes to the roadside only to know that 2/3 of them are going to rot. I've seen in the country in which I grew up a thriving tomato processing industry in Ghana, created by Kwame Nkrumah when I was a kid. I've seen that destroyed by Italian imports and by the diktats of the WTO. I've seen that with my own eyes. So there's that picture. Then there's a picture which makes me smile and makes me happy, not just because I like them and eat them and because I can get them in my local supermarket here in the UK, knowing that they come from Africa. And that is the picture of the pineapple, clearly being prepared for market and being prepared in Africa for global markets. So tell me, Paul, in the context of the much vaunted Africa Free Trade Area, how do you see the Africa Free Trade Area and all this initiative and the effort and the energy that's being put into that? How do you see that playing out in terms of agricultural processing and the manufacture? You said in your presentation was so important. What's it all going to mean for the future, Paul?
Okay, thank you very much. Just some few matters from my office is a local area called Wututu in the southwest region of Cameroon that is one of the bread baskets of tomatoes in Central Africa, right? And we also have to be honest. Working with certain cooperatives, these local farmers just want to survive. They just want to feed their families, right? They have no skill about entrepreneurship. What they do is they know how to produce. They have the techniques of production, and they stand by the road waiting for people coming with their trucks to buy, and they are the mercies of these people because they dictate the prices. And at the end of the day, you look at these farmers year after year, they are of the same income and platform. They don't go above that and always remain poor. What I think for that to be very practical in Africa is we can use the African Free Trade Agreement to massively, work to see how we trade amongst Africans. But with my experience traveling within Africa, we really have to really work. I've traveled by road, I've traveled by air, and I know what it means at the level of the customs. Just sending, for example, we have a startup we're working with that sends bananas to Nigeria, because for those who've been to Lagos, their banana is green, is not yellow, but we produce yellow, healthy bananas from Cameroon, shipping over to Lagos. And at the level of the customs, we face lots of, the huge obstacle where people want to feed for themselves, and they don't care about, when you talk to them about the free trade agreement, the heads of the commissions they have that good intention, but at the level of those agents at the field, it makes it very difficult. So what I want to say is we'll give it some time. There's huge opportunity there. Yeah.
And thank you very much. So huge opportunity, but your challenge to us is to turn policy into good practice. And we accept that challenge, an important one, Paul. And we're now going to go, I'm going to have to leave the questions about in the air, so far as the other panelists are concerned. A big thank you to those panelists. And we're now going to go to Nick, who's going to tell us how we're going to take these questions into the breakout sessions, into the two working groups. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Paul. Yes, hello everyone. So this is part 2 of the event, when we're going to be running 2 roundtable sessions simultaneously. Roundtable 1 is going to be led by Sriram Bharatam, and roundtable 2 is going to be led by Amma Gyampo. I've just set up 2 breakout rooms, and in a moment you can self-select which breakout room you want to participate in. But before you do that, I'm going to ask our roundtable leaders just to give a very quick 30-second introduction into their roundtable, so you can get a good feel for what it is that they're going to be discussing in their roundtable. So first of all, if we could hear from you, Sri.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So the discussion that we intend having in our roundtable is on how might we create sustainable rural youth agripreneurs. How might we create sustainable rural youth agripreneurs? To just set the context, majority of the youth are doing so-called entrepreneurship, and what they really do is a side hustle by default and not by design. So they really don't know what they don't know. As I shared earlier, an average Kenyan is doing 3 side hustles, and they are busy doing that, and they're just not growing. Now, we would like to discuss about how we can build these local capacities. How do we make agriculture interesting again for the youth to come back into it? And how we can come out creating some local solutions for these local challenges. Thank you.
Thanks, Sri, that's great. Okay, and Amma, if we could hear from you, please, about your roundtable session.
So our roundtable discussion will be around the agri-tech farm hubs as a concept. We are welcoming people to kind of poke holes in the concept and figure out how we can connect and actually maybe take it to the next step in terms of partnerships, sponsorship, funding, resourcing, connections, introductions to make it come to life. So that's really the objective of that session.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very, very much. Okay, everyone. So like I said, the breakout rooms are now open. You can find them at the bottom of your screen if you click on the more icon.